Hey guys, in today's video I bring you an impressive and transformative story. Let's meet Ezekiel Ashford, a devout Jew whose faith was turned upside down after a near-death experience. He found himself out of his body, passed through a tunnel of light, and was taken to a celestial realm where he witnessed the history of humanity, visited a celestial library, and made the most shocking discovery of his life. At the height of his journey, he encountered Jesus, who revealed a truth that was impossible to ignore. What he saw on the other side changed everything. So, before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any stories like this. Now get ready for this shocking revelation. My name is Ezekiel Ashford, and for 43 years of my life, I was a man of unquestioning faith. My commitment to the Torah was absolute, my identity as a Jew unshakable. I was a history teacher and an active member of the synagogue in Charleston, Carolina do Sul, where I was born and raised within the traditions of my people. My grandfather, a World War II survivor, always said that our faith was the flame that kept our people alive. That's why I never questioned it. I prayed, kept the Sabbath, studied sacred texts, and avoided anything that might divert me from the path of my ancestors. Since I was little, I saw Christianity as a strange faith, a departure from the truth given to our people on Mount Sinai. On the night of my accident, I had just finished evening prayers at the synagogue. It was a night of autumn, and the breeze carried the smell of dry leaves mixed with a faint aroma of spices from the nearby houses. I walked slowly through the quiet streets, my mind immersed in preparing for the Sabbath. The holy day was approaching, and I felt that familiar serenity that always enveloped me in these moments. The wind suddenly picked up, lifting leaves from the sidewalk. A chill ran down my spine, for no apparent reason. I huddled a little in my coat and kept walking. Charleston was a peaceful city at night, and the streetlights softly lit the street, creating long, flickering shadows on the walls of the historic homes. That's when it happened. One dry bang broke the silence of the night. Something inside me knew before my eyes even saw. Instinctively, I looked up and saw the branch gigantic detaching from the tree. In a matter of milliseconds, everything went into slow motion. I tried to move, I tried to run, but there was no time. Listen or violent impact in the head, and I was thrown to the ground. The pain came like an explosion. Afterwards, the world had got completely dark. The silence was the first thing I noticed. An absolute dense silence, as if sound itself had been ripped out of existence. It wasn't just the absence of noise, it was a quiet viva, a palpable presence. I expected pain. After that brutal impact, it was only logical that my body was in agony, but there was nothing. No pain, no heaviness, no breathing, just peace. So I saw it. My own body was lying on the sidewalk, immersed in a pool of blood. The image should have horrified me, but I wasn't afraid. It was like looking at a stranger. My face was pale, still, and blood ran down the side of my head, staining the concrete dark and shiny in the streetlights. I watched everything from above, as if I were floating in the air. The wind continued to blow, making the leaves dance around me. Across the street, a woman opened her front door and let out a scream. "My God! He's hurt! Someone please help!" A young man passing by started running, taking his phone out of his pocket. I saw him dial 911, his fingers shaking. In a matter of seconds, other people appeared. A man knelt next to my body, pressing his hands to his chest to try to revive him. You knew that was no use, I was dead. Interestingly, there was no despair. No panic. It was as if a part of me already understood that this wasn't the end, just the beginning of something bigger. It was then that I realized a light in the corner of my vision. At first, it was just a subtle glow, almost like an impression in the eyes. But then it started to grow. It got more and more intense, warm and embracing. It wasn't the cold, sterile light of a lamp, nor the blinding glare of the sun. It was something alive. And I felt the so-called. The light attracted me in an irresistible way, like a magnet. like a song I couldn't ignore. And then, without any effort, I went to her. As soon as I gave birth, I was enveloped by an indescribable feeling of lightness. There was no weight, no fear, just a steady flow of energy that pulled me forward. I didn't walk, I didn't fly, but I move, as if I were part of an invisible current that carried me towards something bigger. The world around me began to lose its clarity. The colors of the city disappeared, the shapes dissolved. The sound of the sirens that were beginning to approach became muffled, distant. All that was left was the ethereal light and sound that filled my consciousness. I was sucked into a pulsating light tunnel. It was not a physical corridor, but something alive, something conscious. The light around it wasn't just brightness. It had texture, depth, a own rhythm, as if it were guiding me to some specific destination. All around me, indescribable colors danced and mixed, forming patterns that I couldn't fully comprehend. What am I? My God, the sound. It was a melody without instruments, without a voice, but at the same time perfect. A sound that could not be heard with the ears, but with the soul. It was peace. I didn't know how long I had been there, but I felt like moving towards something bigger. In front of me, the light grew more and more intense, radiating a welcoming warmth, a love that was deeper than anything I had ever experienced. And then, the tunnel opened. I was in a vast, infinite space where the air itself seemed to be made of liquid light. Everything around shone with a splendor that could not be compared to anything on Earth. The landscape was unreal, translucent mountains, rivers of golden light, fields that seemed alive, as if they were made of pure energy. But the most incredible thing wasn't the place itself, they were they. There were presences all around me. I didn't see them with my physical eyes, but the felt, pure consciences, familiar essences. They surrounded me, vibrating in a rhythm that wasn't threatening, but welcoming. And then a voice echoed inside me. "Welcome, Ezekiel." My heart, or whatever I had left on that side, stirred. I recognized that voice. And when I turned around, there he was. My grandfather. My grandfather, David Ashford, it was there, standing before me as real as it had been in life. He used the same well-tailored gray suit that he always wore on Saturdays, and his expression was serene, full of love and wisdom. But there was something different. He no longer looked like an old man. There were no wrinkles on his face, nor were his shoulders bowed by the weight of years. He radiated light, and I could feel his presence not just with my eyes, but with all my essence. "Zaid?" My voice came out shaky. He smiled, the same kind smile as always. "I'm here, my boy." My heart overflowed. I hadn't seen my grandfather in 20 years since he left after a long battle with cancer, but at that moment there was no pain, there was no suffering. Just a love so deep that it made me want run into your arms. And then other figures began to appear around. My Leah's grandmother, radiant as I had never seen her before. My Uncle Nathan, who had died in a car accident when I was still a teenager. Childhood friends who had already left. Each of them, they recognized me, welcomed me as if they had known I was coming for a long time. We didn't need to talk to understand each other. Our meeting was made up of pure feeling, the feeling of being accepted completely, without reservation. It was something I had never experienced in my earthly life. But then, my grandfather put a hand on my shoulder and looked me in the eyes. His expression became more serious, deeper. "There are still things you need to see, Ezekiel." It was then that I realized that the very space around us was changing. The light started to shine, take shapes, and vivid images emerged before me. I was being taken through history, but not as a spectator. You felt all. You lived every moment. And that's how my journey throughout the history of humanity began. The images around me began to form like open windows in time. They weren't just visions. I was there, as if my consciousness had been transported into the events. I didn't just watch, I felt. Suddenly, I was in the middle of the desert. The air was hot and dry, and the sound of a colossal thunder echoed across the mountains. Before me, A crowd was gathered at the foot of an immense mountain, and fear was palpable in the air. I recognized the scene immediately. Era Mount Sinai. The people around me trembled as a thick cloud covered the top of the mountain. Lightning flashed across the sky, and golden light pulsed like living fire. Then a mighty voice, impossible to describe, filled the heavens, a delivery of the Torah. I saw Moses rise the mountain and disappear into the light. I felt the awe, the terror, and the immensity of God's presence at that moment. It was real. Era so real as anything I had ever experienced in life. The weather changed again. The images got mixed up, and I was thrown into another time. Now I was in Jerusalem, but it wasn't the modern city I knew. Before me, Solomon's first temple. It stood tall in indescribable grandeur. The shine of gold and the smoke of sacrifices rising to the heavens, they filled the environment with a divine presence. I saw the priests, the Levites singing songs, the people bringing their offerings. But then the view changed again. I was in a time of terror and destruction. The armies of Babylon had invaded Jerusalem. The temple was on fire, the walls crumbling. The screams of the people echoed in my chest, and I could feel the deep pain of loss, of diaspora, of exile. I tried to look away, but I couldn't look away. Grandfather appeared at my side again. Each event, each pain, and each fall are part of a larger pattern. The images continued. Centuries passed before me. The second temple was erected, and then destroyed again. Our people spread across the world. But then views began to change. The time was running out, approaching a crucial moment. And I felt something was about to happen. The views around me began to change. The images of Jerusalem's destruction vanished like mist in the wind, and in their place an immense hall of golden light appeared. Before me, endless rows of shelves rose. But they were not common. They did not keep parchment, nor books made of paper or leather. On every shelf, there were rollers of light pulsing as if they were alive. The light wasn't just a glow, it told stories. It vibrated with knowledge. A celestial library. I felt a chill run through my essence. I knew, without anyone having to tell me, who were there, the records of every soul that ever lived. The stories of every man, every woman, every thought, every decision. My grandfather was next to me, watching my astonishment with an understanding smile. Everything we are, everything we choose, is here. He reached out, and one of the light scrolls slid off the shelves, floating toward me. When he touched my hands, I knew immediately what it was. Era My Life. The scroll opened, and suddenly everything was revealed in front of me. My childhood, my early years learning about the Torah, feeling proud of my heritage. The sparkle in my father's eyes when I read aloud in synagogue for the first time. My unquestionable commitment with the teachings of the rabbis. But then, I saw the things I never wanted to face. The moments when I was too hard on those who didn't follow the faith with the same intensity. The dialogues that I avoided, the conversations that could have expanded my worldview, but that I rejected for fear of questioning. The times I ignored the compassion because it was too focused on rules and rituals. And then came the opportunities lost. The nights I felt curiosity about Jesus, but I closed my heart before even trying to understand. The moments when I heard testimonies, but I rejected it before even considering it. I wasn't a bad man, but I had refused to see. My grandfather placed a hand on my shoulder. But now you will see. And then, the light around me changed. The atmosphere became more intense. And he appeared. The air around me changed completely. The light that filled that celestial space began to dim, intensify, becoming more denser, more alive. I felt something I had never felt before, a love so absolute that it made me shudder. Then he appeared. At first I couldn't see him clearly. It was light, pure and radiant, but not an ordinary light. She was conscious, gift, as if every particle of that luminosity contained a truth that my soul recognized before I even understood it. Then, slowly, the light condensed and took shape before me. And there it was, he, Jesus. But he was not as Zen, I imagined. He didn't look like the European paintings I had seen in my earthly life. He was Jewish. His face bore the features of a Middle Eastern man: dark skin, dark hair falling over his shoulders, deep-set eyes, so deep they seemed to contain entire universes within them. And what hit me the most, it wasn't his appearance, but his presence. Love, authority, absolute understanding. He knew me, every part of me, every thought I had ever had, every moment of doubt I stifled. He smiled, a smile full of grace and power. Shalom, Ezekiel. My soul, if turned over inside me. That word, so familiar, spoken by he, carried a weight I had never felt before. My body, or my essence, becomes a good one without me wanting to. I wanted to resist, I wanted to question, I wanted to hold on to my identity, to the beliefs that formed me. But before him, all resistance melted away. I knew who he was. And, at the same time, my heart screamed, "It can't be." Jesus stepped forward, his eyes locked on mine. "You know me, Ezekiel, you always knew me." I nodded, feeling my soul split between what I always believed and what was before me. "No, that can't be true." But he just smiled again. "So let me show you." And with just one look, it transported me through time. The reality around me dissolved like mist in the wind. We were no longer in the heavenly library, but in another time, another space. Jesus didn't need to say anything. Your presence was enough, and I was pulled into something much bigger than myself. The environment formed around me. It was an old synagogue. The smell of wood and parchment filled the air. Men of different ages were gathered together, and the murmur of conversations created a solemn atmosphere. So someone got up and walked to the center. It was Jesus. But not the glorified Jesus I had just seen. Now, he was a young man, dressed like an ordinary Jew, holding a Torah scroll. My heart sank. I knew exactly what was about to happen. He opened the parchment and began to read. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." Silence fell over the synagogue. All eyes were fixed on him. Then Jesus closed the scroll, looked at the congregation, and said, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your ears." The reaction was instantaneous. Indignation. Nervous murmurs spread. Some stood up furious. I could feel the weight of emotions around: rejection, resistance. The scene changed. Now I was outside on a hill at sunset. A crowd gathered around Jesus. I saw him touch the sick, restore sight to the blind, bring hope to the hopeless. You felt the love that flowed from him. Then suddenly darkness took over the sky. The air became heavy, suffocating. The smell of blood and iron was in the air. The sound of hammers echoed in the distance. My heart froze. I was at Golgotha. Jesus was nailed to a cross, the body torn apart, bloodied. His breathing was heavy, pain visible in every fiber of his being. But in the midst of suffering, there was something stronger than the pain in your gaze. Love. Even there, betrayed, tortured, abandoned, he still experienced. And then he spoke. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." The weight of those words fell on me like a bolt of lightning. My chest burned like something inside me is breaking. He was not a rebel. He wasn't a faker. He was the Messiah. The earth shook. The veil of the temple was torn. The sky turned completely dark. And then, everything went out. Suddenly, I was back in the kingdom of light, facing him once again. But now, I couldn't deny it anymore. My knees weakened. My soul was on fire. "My God," I whispered, my voice breaking. He came closer and placed his hand on my shoulder. "Now you know." My mind screamed. How could I go back to my normal life after this? How could I tell this to my family, to my community? I would be rejected. He would be seen as a traitor. Jesus looked into my eyes as if he was seeing all my anxieties, all my fears. "Ezekiel, you are not alone." His eyes shone with an indescribable intensity. "But you need to go back." Before I could say anything, a force pulled me back. The celestial world collapsed around me. The ethereal sound disappeared, replaced by voices, screams, mechanical noises. Pain. An overwhelming impact hit me as if I had been thrown against a concrete wall. I was back in my body, and everything around me was in chaos. The shock of returning to his body was like falling off a building and hitting the ground with full force. The pain came like a crushing wave, yanking me out of my state of celestial bliss and throwing me back into the harsh, unforgiving reality of the physical world. I heard voices. Some were far away, others too close. My chest rose and fell with difficulty as if a weight were crushing me. I tried to open my eyes, but my vision was blurry, dancing between white lights and flickering shadows. "He's back! My God, he's back!" A female voice shouted near me. It was my sister, Ruth. "Ezekiel?" Her voice was choked. "Can you hear me?" I tried to respond, but my throat was dry as sand. Every part of my body hurt. My head throbbed, as if someone was hitting it with a hammer. Then another voice entered the confusion around me. "The pressure is stable, but he needs oxygen now." Someone placed a mask over my face. The cold air entered my lungs, and slowly, the world began to take shape again. I was in an ambulance. Sirens screamed, and the vehicle rocked as it rolled through the streets of Charleston. Red and blue lights flashed through the glass, reflecting off Ruth's pale face. She held my hand tightly, her eyes wide and red from crying. "You stopped breathing, Ezekiel." Her voice trembled. "They said you were dead." I tried to process those words. Died. Yes. You took. And what I experienced beyond death, it was more real than anything I had ever experienced. The memory of Jesus' presence still burned within me, alive, pulsating, indisputable. My mind struggled to absorb everything that had happened, but my body was weak, limited. I wanted to talk. I wanted to tell Ruth that everything was fine. I had seen something extraordinary, but the words, they didn't come. The ambulance braked suddenly, and the doors opened. A team of doctors appeared, moving quickly around me. Male patient, 43 years old, severe head trauma. He was pulseless for more than 9 minutes, but came back to life. Shock spread across the nurses' faces. Some exchanged discreet glances as if they didn't believe it. I wanted to tell them what had happened, but at that moment, all I could do was try to breathe. I was rushed into the hospital, my vision flickering between blinding white lights and worried faces. The noise of the stretcher wheels echoed in the corridors, and medical voices mixed in a whirlwind of instructions. My head was throbbing, and my body felt heavy, like I was being pulled back to earth against my will. Inside, however, I was still there. I still felt the touch of Jesus. I still saw the unmistakable shine in his eyes. I still heard his voice saying, "Now you know. You knew." I knew my life would never be the same again. I was subjected to a battery of tests. I heard the doctors talking about severe head trauma, about the time my heart stood still, and about the possible neurological damage. But for me, none of that mattered. My body might have suffered, but my soul had been transformed. Hours passed. I was moved to a room, still monitored, surrounded by softly beeping machines. Ruth didn't leave my side, even though her face was tense, disturbed. Finally, after regaining some strength, I was able to speak. My voice was hoarse but determined. I saw Jesus. Ruth's face changed immediately. His eyes turned cold. His body stiffened. What? I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of what I was about to say. "I died, Ruth, And then I looked directly at her, and he was there. The silence in the room became unbearable. No. She shook her head, laughing nervously, as if she was waiting for me to say it was a joke. You must have dreamed, Ezekiel. Your brain has been through trauma. It can't be that. I let her talk. I understood. But then I looked into her eyes, holding her hand. I know what I've always believed. I know what I always rejected. But Ruth, Jesus is real. He is the Messiah. Your eyes, they were filled with tears, but they were not emotional. They were from fear. She pulled her hand away from mine, as if I were contaminated by something unclean. No, don't say that. His lips trembled. You are confused. But I wasn't. For the first time in my life, I saw everything with absolute clarity. Days later, I left the hospital. Ruth barely spoke to me, and the synagogue community already knew that something had happened to me. The visits of Rabbi Feinberg were the most difficult. He listened to me patiently, but his expression was the same as disbelief and worry. Ezekiel, you have been through something profound, but don't let it take you away from your faith. I took a deep breath. Rabbi, I have not lost my faith. He looked me in the eyes, waiting for my explanation. And then I said, I found her. They were months of resistance. I lost friends. Some treated me like pity, as if I were sick. Others, they just rejected me. But I wasn't afraid, because I knew the truth. Certainty burned inside me like a flame that was impossible to put out. I died for 9 minutes and 22 seconds. But I lived an eternity. And now I can't hide it anymore. I need to tell the world why Jesus is real. And me, I will never be the same again. Shalom. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.